So have you noticed that everything just feels a little bit harder lately? More expensive, more complicated? Well, it's not just you. It feels like the entire operating system of our global economy is shifting right under our feet. Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful idea called the Friction Doctrine to try and understand why the world we all got used to seems to be fading away.
For the last, 30 or 40 years, the global economy had one simple mission: make things cheaper. That's it. Capital would flow wherever it could get the highest return, and factories would pop up wherever labor was the cheapest. And as this slide puts it, efficiency wasn't just a business strategy anymore. It became a creed, this almost religious belief that promised prosperity for absolutely everyone.
And that right there is the huge question we're all facing now. Because that whole system, that creed of pure, frictionless efficiency, well, it's breaking down. So what comes next? And maybe the bigger question is, what's the real cost of moving on?
Okay, so let's first really understand this old paradigm, this efficiency creed. It was an entire worldview, really, built on the idea that if you just let markets do their thing, they would optimize everything perfectly, from where we build our cars to how we finance our companies.
But that world, it's over. We are now entering what our source material calls the age of friction. And this isn't some small adjustment, it's a fundamental change. All of a sudden, things like geopolitics, national security, and just making sure you can get the parts you need, those things are slamming the brakes on that old logic. The main question is no longer, is it cheaper? Now it's, is it reliable?
Now here's the big twist. That age of efficiency didn't just happen by accident. It wasn't natural. It was really an artificial system, and it was built on a very powerful and often totally invisible foundation.
And that foundation? It really rested on two giant pillars, both provided by the United States. First, the American military basically guaranteed the security of its allies, which meant they could spend less on tanks and more on their economies. And second, the US dollar gave the whole world a stable, reliable currency for trade. You could think of this as a hidden subsidy that made this hyper-globalized world possible.
And if you think of those two pillars as the hardware, well, on top of that, we installed a specific kind of software: neoliberalism. This was the philosophy that really pushed free markets, deregulation, and shareholder returns above pretty much everything else. It just became the default setting for governments and corporations all across the West.
And this brings us to what's known as the China bet, which basically put this entire system into overdrive. Just look at this slide. It lays out the bargain perfectly. The West got exactly what it wanted: tons of cheap goods and low inflation. But what did it give up? Its industrial depth, its factories. Meanwhile, China got all that manufacturing power and strategic influence, and the result? A massive, and as we're all figuring out now, a really dangerous dependency.
So, what happens when this super efficient, beautifully optimized system collides with the messy, unpredictable reality of global power politics? Well, the entire system starts to crack. The old map we were using to navigate the world, it just doesn't work anymore.
We're suddenly dealing with a whole new set of frictions. Geopolitics is back with a vengeance, turning our supply chains into strategic vulnerabilities. Technology isn't just a neutral tool for connecting people anymore. It's a battleground for who's going to dominate in things like AI and semiconductors. And finance, especially the US dollar, is being used as a weapon, which is forcing other countries to scramble for alternatives.
And this creates something the source calls the neutrality trap, which is a really fascinating idea. See, a lot of countries want to stay neutral, work with both the US and China. But modern tech makes that almost impossible. I mean, you can't really run sensitive American software on a Chinese-built 5G network, right? The actual physical reality of the technology forces you to pick a side.
All this leads to what's being called a crisis of incoherence, especially in the West. You've got the security establishment pulling hard in one direction, demanding resilience and decoupling. Then you've got Wall Street pulling in the exact opposite direction, demanding open markets. And then there's the tech elite, who are almost acting like their own nation-state, with their own agenda. And when everyone is pulling in a different direction, you just get confusion and contradictory policies.
So, that's the bottom line, right? If the old rulebook is totally obsolete and we're all stuck in this confusing in-between phase, what's the way forward? How do we possibly operate in this new, much tougher world?
Well, we need a new strategy, a new operating manual for this messy era. And that's where our source introduces this idea of the Friction Doctrine.
At its core, the Friction Doctrine is a pretty simple but also really profound shift in thinking. It basically argues that in today's world, success isn't about being the most efficient anymore. It's about being the most resilient. It's about having the durable, long-term capability to handle shocks to the system. And this new doctrine creates a completely new logic for governments. The old game was about cutting tariffs and opening markets. The new game is about achieving these goals you see right here. Tech sovereignty, diversifying your supply chains, getting the best talent, building financial options outside the dollar. It is a fundamental pivot away from prioritizing cost and towards prioritizing capability.
But, and this might be the single most important takeaway from all of this new approach comes at a cost. Resilience is not free. Actually, it's very, very expensive.
This slide lays out the great trade-off in the starkest terms you can imagine. The old world, on the left, the world of pure efficiency. That gave us deflationary pressure. In plain English, cheaper stuff. The new world on the right, the world of resilience, does the exact opposite. It creates inflationary pressure. Plain English, things get more expensive.
And that economic tension doesn't just stay in a spreadsheet, it spills right into our politics. You've got governments caught in a vice. On one side, there's this strategic need to build resilience, but on the other, there's the public's very real, very loud demand for a low cost of living. And that conflict, that's a huge driver of the political tension and populism we're seeing all over the world today.
So, the Friction Doctrine isn't an easy path. It doesn't promise a return to that cheap and easy world of the past. Its promise is something different, something that's maybe a lot more valuable in the 21st century, stability when things get tough, when the system is under strain.
So this leaves us with the final critical question. We are actively trading a world that was optimized for cheapness for a new one that absolutely must be built for durability. And the question for all of us is, what price are we actually willing to pay for it?